Hello, my name's Ian Seeger from Pilot Career News. On the 6th and 7th of November, we held our very first virtual edition of Pilot Careers Live. We streamed over 30 different seminars with 60 speakers. There were 2 days packed full of great information. Of course, we recorded everything, and you're about to watch one of the videos from the event. Before you do, I just want to thank our sponsors, Bose, Alsim, Entro, and of course Poolies. Without them and without the exhibitors, it wouldn't be possible. The exhibitor pages are still live, so feel free to head on over there. Go to www.pilotcareerslive.com and click through to the exhibitors. There's loads of information, loads of downloads, all sorts of great stuff there for you. Anyway, enjoy the video, and if you find it useful, really appreciate it if you click subscribe on our YouTube channel. Thank you. Bye-bye. Hello and welcome to the next session, which is me chatting to John Strickland about the future shape of the airline industry. Now, this is not your typical chat. If you're a lot of the stuff we've been talking about throughout the event has been modular, integrated, MCC, APS MCC, ground school, and all sorts of other bits that are directly related to training. John is an airline consultant who's been in the business for longer than, I don't know, at least 18 years, I believe, as a consultant, and a long time a long time before that. So this is really a look forward to how your industry will be in the future, how the COVID crisis is changing things, how things are going to, how things will be different, whether there's more long haul, more short haul. Spoiler, there's probably not going to be more long haul, at least not in the short term. But, maybe John will say differently, and John certainly knows more than I do. So before we move on to that, just a quick piece of housekeeping rules. There'll be a Q&A session just after this, which will try and address any questions that have come up through any of the morning sessions. And obviously there's a live chat during this. If you get a chance, please go visit the exhibitors on the stands. If you have any specific questions about trading, then that's a great place to find the answer. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Bose, Poolies, and if you need to buy anything from Poolies, use code PCO at checkout, get yourself 5% off, and Alsim and Entro. So without me wibbling on any further, let's see. John, are you there?
I'm indeed.
Excellent. How are you doing?
Morning to everybody.
Well, it's great to talk to you. We spoke first time maybe a couple of months ago during the lockdown about the shape of the future airline industry. I'm guessing that the latest travel restrictions that the government brought in from Thursday must have them tearing their hair out even more if they've got any left.
Well, I was thinking about the state of the industry a few days ago, just as we're now into earnings season. We've had results now, for example, Air France, KLM, Lufthansa, IAG, Ryanair, Wizz, US carriers, and so the list goes on. And I thought maybe the best way to describe that is 50 shades of bad. I mean, it's really, you can't put it any other way. I mean, this is undoubtedly the worst crisis we've ever seen. And to add to the 18 years you attributed to me, my career, add another 20 to 38 years, actually, when I've been in the industry. I've never seen anything remotely close to this. So there's no point to try to sugar the pill in any way. This is a deep crisis. Not every airline is going to survive. We see the consequences now in terms of employment with those who already were in the industry and indeed the chances to join it. But I don't want to sound really pessimistic for the sake of pessimism. I feel very cautious about how long recovery is going to take. Nobody actually knows, but it's going to be a very long time. We are talking about years, and the going time frame for many of the industries about 5 years. And of course, it will vary a lot by market, by airline, but I believe it will come back. The world needs aviation, air transport in the 21st century. But when it comes back, it will be in a different shape and form for sure. And I'm sure we can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I was talking to an airline on a couple of days ago, and they were discussing their real hope that they would get very quick testing at airports and stuff like that, and believe that there's actually quite a pent up demand for air travel at the moment. It's just that people are worried about the uncertainty, and it doesn't seem to be, from their point of view, too much of a health concern in terms of travelling. Just the uncertainty and whether you'd have to quarantine or not quarantine. So their view is very much that quick airport testing would see a significant change.
I mean, it's complicated. There's no doubt there is pent-up demand, because we see where demand has come back, it has done so in domestic markets where there isn't the complication of traveling borders, and perhaps not surprisingly in countries of the size of China, where domestic air travel is pretty well back to how it was. And it's worth saying there, I was talking to another industry colleague this week who explained the absolute ruthlessness, you could say, with which the Chinese are tackling the virus. I heard of an expat European and family coming back to China where they were based, and then having to not only have blood tests, but then a 2-week quarantine, absolutely rigid, not to leave the room at all in an airport hotel, then being escorted home for 2 weeks, and again, 2 more weeks of quarantine with a camera put on the door to make sure they didn't go out, which sounds pretty horrendous. But when that was done, then I think they had an app which showed they were clear to go. Then they could travel out, do what they wanted, get on flights, and indeed do so without masks. Now, we don't have that kind of level of determination, or perhaps that's not the right word, it's just a different philosophy and societal context in the West. But we have to get some methodology that will help to build a confidence and allow it to happen. I mentioned it has happened in domestic markets because it's less complex. Russia's another good example. Russia's domestic market, which is big, is pretty well the same as last year. But as you said, international travel where we have to cross borders, and we don't know if we're going to be quarantined or whether travel bans are going to be put in place, or lockdowns, as we've seen from the UK, or this ban from or a quarantine requirement coming from Denmark to the UK that came in overnight. This is what's putting people off. But we saw conversely, outside of the parameters of the domestic markets, which are buoyant, that, for example, a couple of weeks ago when the UK took the Canary Islands off the quarantine list and allowed a corridor, there was a massive spike in demand. Even on Monday this week, Michael O'Leary from Ryanair said that he saw bookings in Ryanair go from, I think he said, about 2,000 bookings to 28,000 bookings in the space of a few hours. I know IAG in a recent investor presentation also used the Canaries as an example. So I think short-haul travel outside of borders, there's definitely demand, not only for holidays, but of course visiting friends and relations is very important. People have to go. We see airlines like Wizz benefiting from that because it's a major part of their market. People are not making a discretionary choice to go on holiday. They maybe work abroad and want to come home. They want to visit friends and family. So there's a lot of pent-up demand. And I think there'll be elements of that on long-haul travel too, when we get back to having meaningful long-haul travel.
So, I mean, you mentioned short-haul travel there. When the industry recovers, whether that's, and let's all keep our fingers crossed that it's sooner rather than later, but you're right, none of us really know when that's going to be or how it's going to recover when it does. How might the industry look different, do you think, compared to the way it looks now in terms of fleets?
Well, first of all, I think the industry will be smaller in scale for quite some time going ahead. Looking at that time frame I mentioned of maybe 5 years, we see, number one, the airlines are going to fail, and I think the coming few months of the Northern Hemisphere winter will be a real testing time. I will really be amazed if we don't see some failures in that period. We'll see further consolidation, and even in those airlines who survive, we've seen massive changes already in fleet. In the US, for example, there's been a large early retirement of older narrow-bodied jets like the MD-80 series. They're gone, and certainly at the present time not replaced, but ultimately will have to be. And we've seen in other parts of the world, particularly in Europe, but also in Asia, a retirement of the very large wide-bodied aircraft. The venerable 747, for example, BA has just retired 32 aircraft. That's a big chunk of capacity out of the market. And even younger aircraft like the A380 have been disappearing. We'd already seen aircraft of smaller capacities on the wide-body side of the tracks coming to service, maybe very fortunately for airlines who have them, like the 787 or the A350, which are actually working pretty hard right now. And I think that's going to be the way forward. Smaller wide bodies, even Boeing's new 777X, the 8 and 9 series, which of course is still under flight test currently, looks to be a very large aircraft in this context. And what that will mean for orders, or when that aircraft starts to fulfill its potential, is not clear. But what I do see is, as I mentioned, the retirement of some of the older narrow bodies, particularly the US, and airlines' understandable reduction in risk tolerance, never mind financial ability to withstand it, means I think narrow-bodied aircraft and the new long-range potential that they're offering, to some extent, in Boeing's case with the 737 MAX, once it gets through all its necessary hurdles and certifications to come back into service. But it does look to me like Airbus has got a winner as well with the new versions of the A320 family, particularly the 321 LR and XLR, because airlines, number one, want to take less risk by putting less seats into the market on any given flight. Then they don't have to worry about what kind of pricing they have to offer to fill it. Well, they have to worry about it, but we don't need to discount necessarily as deep with less seats. Secondly, the operating cost of such aircraft, of course, is less because one, they're smaller, and two, the efficiencies we've seen coming through with new engines, like on the 320 and 321 Neo, reduces fuel burn as well. But to have those aircraft which started their life as purely short-haul aircraft, in the case of the MAX or the 320 family, now being able to do some significant long-haul flights with decent payloads, that is, I think, in the future, kind of manna from heaven for airlines. If you can get one aircraft type, but you can deploy very widely between short-haul and long-haul in many different markets, and simplifications in terms of the support that involves with engineering and parts, obviously pilot force and commonality there. It's got to be much better when we get to that point, and we're not, of course, not there yet. But Boeing just issued their commercial market outlook a few weeks ago, and they saw that, number one, the biggest trend in the years ahead is a replacement one, for the reasons I've said, replacement of aircraft rather than going out and expanding and taking new aircraft for growth. But secondly, that it will be narrow bodies that will be the biggest chunk of the market. Out of about 40,000 new aircraft that Boeing still expects, which we should say is a positive, they do expect the need for these planes over the next 20 years. Over 30,000 of them are going to be narrow-bodied aircraft.
I mean, I think as well, the Boeing pilot and technician outlook over the next 20 years reduced its pilot out demand from 148,000 just down to 147,000. So a difference of just 1,000 pilots over the next 20 years, which kind of surprised me. I thought they were going to come up with a different figure, but clearly with the airframes that they're talking about as well, then they're expecting and predicting a recovery at some stage. And talking of which, are there any airlines that are out there?
Just jump in again, because I think on that, I mean, I was also intrigued, to see that level of optimism they have. They talk about returning to the long-term trend, and somebody else I was talking to yesterday said to me, but which trend? Is it a new trend? But anyway, they assume a trend we've had of maybe 4% or so growth per annum. They do see inevitably a big hit in the next 4 or 5 years. But if we think about parts of the world where we have dense and growing populations like China or Asia in particular, not surprisingly, that reflects in Boeing's outlook as being a big area of growth. The drivers we were just talking about in terms of people wanting to travel for reasons of leisure or visiting friends and relations, and just as aircraft retire, so not only do we see the sad situation of pilots losing their jobs now, maybe at the beginning of their careers or mid-career, but we also, of course, have pilot retirals anyway, and inevitably, as you go on, that continues. So we need aircraft replacement, we need pilot replacement.
So, yeah, no, absolutely. And so the long-term outlook over the next 20 years actually seems pretty positive, and that, I mean, although I always say if someone's entering the industry now and expecting to work in the industry for the next 40 years, it's likely that they will see perhaps another 2 or 3 events, a little bit like the one that we're seeing now. And it's just something you have to plan for. It's the way the world is. Airlines you were mentioning, clearly not in a happy place currently, to say the least. Do you know of any airlines that are out there shopping for new aircraft? Or are they all hunkered down?
I think pretty well airlines are hunkered down, but of course we've got a pretty big order book in place already anyway. So to an extent, it's how many of those orders are fulfilled. I mean, Ryanair again said on Monday they saw one of the biggest opportunities in the next 5 or 6 years was a renegotiation of their ongoing order book. And I would expect that to be twofold. And as a matter of interest, I'm interviewing Michael Leary next Tuesday for a travel event here in London, so I'll be asking him about this then. But they will want to reduce the price of the existing order. I'm sure they'll chip away to try to do that, but they've already indicated that they would like to go further. They have upwards of 200 737 MAX on order. I think it's a MAX 9, if I'm not mistaken, in the case of Ryanair. But they're also looking to the planned MAX 10, which will be bigger. So there's one example of an airline that's growing and continuing to do so. Similarly, Wizz Air in Europe, they are showing themselves to be very bullish. I mean, number one, they have 2 years cash in the bank, even if they don't operate a single flight or fly a single passenger, and they can survive. And they've been very, I think, judiciously signing up new bases and opening new routes in the last few months. It's stunning. I think it's over 200 new routes and 12 or 13 new bases. They've done it carefully. They've done a bit of moving the aircraft around the chessboard of the existing fleet, but they have a massive order book too. And I think inevitably lessors as well, the more sound members of that community will be looking now to get out and take the right kind of aircraft onto the books. I've certainly seen Stephen Utvar-Hazy of Airline, a very seasoned executive in that part of the industry, talking about having the right portfolio. So I think the kind of narrow-bodied aircraft we talked about, people will be looking for and want to have those available for airline customers as and when that demand is there.
So from a crewing point of view, a resurgence, whenever that comes in the short-haul market and narrow-bodied aircraft, ought to be a good thing for crewing, I presume.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have a high ratio of crews on short-haul aircraft. The short-haul growth is all about sectors, so you're needing more crews per day to resource the number of sectors on a short-haul aircraft as compared to long-haul. I mean, obviously there are different elements on long-haul when you factor in the crew you require for crew rest between duties on long-haul and being down the line. But it is undoubtedly going to be a strong area, as it already is, and we see the low-cost carriers have been the winners in every other crisis. Number one, by having cash reserves, secondly, low cost base, and being very nimble, and by nature, in their DNA, looking forward to new opportunities. One area I'm not so clear about is the regional space, because it's always been difficult. It's often, of course, an entry point for pilots, either innately because it's the start point for a flying career, or in some cases it maybe suits lifestyle. If you happen to be from a remote part of the globe and you have an airline operating local services, it may actually suit your lifestyle. But it's challenging financially. We've seen, of course, a number of regional airlines fail even before the coronavirus pandemic. Flybe was on the cusp. They said one of the reasons for failure was the onset of this crisis. They had many other problems, but there's a real need for regional travel. There are many places where the only way to move around is by air. I was just reading one of the Latin American airline bosses, I think it was in Colombia, talking about mountain ranges. The only way to fly is by air on maybe a 35-minute flight to avoid a 9-hour mountainous road journey. So I think that the solidity of the demand is there. The profitability is more difficult, but equally governments are often willing to step in and ensure those regional services are provided. And again, in that space, we're seeing significant improvements in what aircraft are offered there with the new E-series, E2 series from Embraer. And I find fascinating what is now the A220, previously the Bombardier C series. It's a regional jet, yet it could carry up to almost 150 people and can be deployed on the one hand, and give an example of Air Baltic, they could fly it on a 45-minute sector between, for example, Riga and Helsinki, and then on the next, they could do a near 7-hour sector down to Abu Dhabi. So there is that opportunity there, and of course, if you're operating short and long-haul flights, again, you need an adequate pilot force to match that scheduling.
Well, thank you very much for that summary. So, I'm going to summarise by saying the airline industry has got some challenges ahead, which we all know about. The recovery time, who knows? You're thinking 3 to 5 years, but let's see. Hopefully, I'm kind of hoping you're wrong in a way, but I can completely understand why you.
I hope I'm wrong, but I think we've got to be cautious. I've seen too much claim of false dawn and optimism at the moment, so it's just a time for rebirth and reconstruction, I think, for the future.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, I'm gonna wrap up there, and then I'm gonna run next door, and then we'll do the Q&A session. So hopefully I'll see you and some other panelists in about 30, 40 seconds or so, maybe a minute. Give me time to run. Thank you very much, John. Talk to you later.